TIFU by pretending to be fluent in French to impress a girl, then getting kidnapped in Paris. So, this happened 3 years ago, but the emotional scars are still fresh. I, then 27 had always had a decent ear for languages and could imitate accents fairly well. My problem? I was a pathological overconfident idiot when it came to showing off. It all started with Zoe, a woman I matched with on a language exchange app. She was French, visiting New York for a 6-month architecture internship. We met up a few times, got along great, and I quickly fell into the delusion that I was on the brink of fluency in French. After about a month, I started texting her entirely in French, relying heavily on Google Translate and Duolingo. She seemed impressed, or maybe just confused, and I felt like I was killing it. Eventually, she returned to Paris and invited me to visit. I jumped on the chance, fueled by the combined forces of infatuation and hubris. I figured 2 years of half-assing Duolingo and faking my way through French 101 in college was enough to survive a romantic getaway. I arrived in Paris during a rail strike, which should have been my first clue that things were about to go sideways. Zoe picked me up from the airport in her cousin's ancient Peugeot, and we headed to her flat in Belleville. Everything was going fine until she handed me the keys to the apartment and asked me to meet her at her university later that day. She had a presentation and wouldn't be home until late, but I was free to explore the city. Perfect. Adventure time. I decided to head to Montmartre. I put on my most Parisian outfit, black turtleneck, scarf, absurdly small sunglasses, and hit the metro. That's when the real trouble started. First, I got lost. Deeply, disorientedly lost. I ended up in some residential part of the 18th arrondissement, far from any tourist attractions, with zero cell service and a dying phone. Still, I was determined not to look like a tourist, so I refused to ask anyone for help in English. Big mistake. I wandered into a small convenience store to buy a phone charger, thinking I'd recover signal and get back on track. I walked up to the cashier, a stern-looking middle-aged man with the kind of mustache that could curdle milk, and in my best attempt at casual French, I said, "Bonjour, je voudrais, un câble pour le téléphone?" The guy raised an eyebrow and replied with something like, "Quel type de téléphone?" Only it came out at 3x speed, like machine gun French. I panicked and responded with what I thought was, "I have an iPhone," but apparently sounded like, "I eat iPhones." He looked at me like I had just confessed to a crime. I tried to double down, gesturing wildly and saying, "Oui, je mange iPhones. 2 less jours." I thought I was being funny. He did not. At that moment, 2 other guys came in, friends of his maybe, and he motioned toward me and said something quickly in French. The 3 of them burst out laughing, but not the friendly kind. The next thing I know, one of them says, "Touriste, hein," and grabs my shoulder in a way that was definitely not chill. Thinking I was being scammed or mugged, I bolted out of the store, phoneless and increasingly panicked. I made it about 2 blocks before a small white van pulled up next to me, and one of the guys from the store, let's call him Pierre, shouted, "Attends. Tu as oubli ton sac." I didn't even realize I had dropped my bag. Feeling a brief flicker of relief, I jogged over. Pierre handed me my bag with a smirk. Before I could say merci, someone behind me shoved me lightly into the van. Yes. Into the van. I landed on a pile of newspapers and baguettes. I know, cliché, but this is France. The doors slammed shut, and I felt the van lurch forward. Now, I wasn't entirely sure this was a kidnapping yet. It could have been some French version of a prank. I didn't want to overreact. So I asked, "Tu es que passe," in what I imagined was a calm, assertive tone. It probably came out like Kermit the Frog under duress. The guys ignored me and talked among themselves in rapid French. I caught phrases like "débile" and "le gars pense tu il parle français," which even my trash-level skills could translate as "this idiot thinks he speaks French." It finally hit me. I was being kidnapped because they thought I was either incredibly stupid or incredibly valuable, possibly both. About 20 minutes later, the van stopped. They pulled me out into what looked like a mechanic's garage. One of them asked, in halting English, "You American, yes?" I nodded. They discussed something among themselves, and one of them said, "We want money. Call your embassy." At this point, I realized two things. 1, they were very bad kidnappers. 2, I had no phone. I tried to explain this, but they were unimpressed. So, desperate, I pulled out the only move I had left. I fake cried. And I mean I went full method actor. Tears, sobbing, babbling about how my father was a diplomat, he's not, he sells insurance, how the CIA would find me, they wouldn't, and how I was poor and had nothing of value. They finally left me in a back room while they discussed. About an hour later, the police showed up. Turns out, Zoe had been tracking my phone through Find My iPhone and realized something was wrong when I didn't show up at the university. She called the cops, who traced my last known location and raided the garage. Turns out the kidnappers were a group of low-level scammers who usually preyed on confused tourists, scaring them into paying for protection services or fake fines. I was released, shaken but unharmed, and the scammers were arrested. Zoe was furious and worried and incredibly confused about why I hadn't just asked someone for help. When I told her I didn't want to blow my cover as a fluent French speaker, she laughed so hard she cried, then promptly broke things off a week later. I now speak decent French, for real this time. But every time I hear the phrase "je mange iPhones," I break into a cold sweat. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Spanish to impress a girl at work. And now I'm leading a company-wide bilingual initiative, so this happened over the last 6 months, and I am now so deep in the lie that I'm actually considering enrolling in night school just to survive it. Let's start at the beginning. I have 32M, work in the marketing department of a mid-sized tech company in Austin. We've got a pretty diverse workplace, and there's a significant portion of the staff that's bilingual, mostly Spanish and English. I speak exactly 3.5 words of Spanish, which include hola, cerveza, and no problema, which, as I've learned, is not a phrase native Spanish speakers actually say. 6 months ago, our department hired a new project coordinator, Isabella. She's insanely competent, charming, funny, and she's fluent in Spanish. I'm talking rapid-fire conversations over Zoom with South American clients, dropping idioms like it's nothing. And, as cliché as it sounds, I was smitten from the jump. The problem is, I am not good at flirting. I am especially not good at flirting in front of coworkers. So, my brain, in its infinite wisdom, decided that the best way to impress her was to lie. Not about being married or a millionaire, oh no, that would have limits. No, I told her I was pretty much fluent in Spanish, because I'd lived in Madrid for a bit after college. I don't even know anyone who's been to Madrid. To my horror, her eyes lit up. She was thrilled. She started talking to me in Spanish immediately. I panicked, gave a confident nod, said "sí," and mumbled something that I think included a Portuguese phrase I half remembered from a trip to Lisbon. She paused, clearly confused, and I faked a coughing fit. Then I said I hadn't spoken Spanish in years and was a bit rusty. That should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. What I didn't anticipate was that Isabella would mention it to my manager, during a one-on-one meeting, no less, that she was happy to have another Spanish speaker on the team, and that I could help liaise with our Latin American clients. Next thing I know, I'm being added to email threads with clients from Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina. The emails were in Spanish. I immediately turned to Google Translate like a man crawling across a desert finds an oasis. I spent hours crafting replies, translating, retranslating, and trying to sound natural. I got away with it for a while by keeping my responses short and overly formal. I even threw in a saludos cordiales at the end of every email. Then came the meetings. The first time I was invited to sit in on a Zoom call with our clients in Mexico City, I almost called in sick. Instead, I faked tech issues, turned off my mic and camera, and typed in the chat that I could hear everything fine but couldn't speak due to a faulty headset. I typed vague supportive comments like buena idea and totalmente de acuerdo during the call, which I copy-pasted from language forums. It worked. I was hailed as quiet but insightful. I even got a shout-out during a team meeting for being such a humble team player. At this point, I should have just come clean. But now I was being praised. Isabella would flash me these warm smiles every time someone mentioned my bilingual abilities, and I was high on the validation. So of course, it got worse. Last month, our director decided to roll out a company-wide initiative to increase our engagement with Spanish-speaking clients. Guess who she put in charge of the task force? Yeah. I tried to protest, saying I was too busy, not the right fit, etc. But the director literally said, "You're the only native-level Spanish speaker on the marketing team, and you understand both the business and cultural context." I almost fainted. Now, I'm managing weekly meetings in Spanish. I've been using a mix of Google Translate, AI tools, and late-night Duolingo binges to survive. I prep for meetings like I'm about to testify in front of Congress. I write out every single thing I'm going to say, translate it, memorize it, and pray that no one asks me a follow-up question. But of course, they do. I've started faking a lag during Zoom calls, so I have a few seconds to process what they're saying. Sometimes I repeat their question back in English to confirm, just to buy time. I've also recruited Isabella to co-lead the initiative, under the guise of sharing the leadership experience, but really so she can carry the actual language load when things get out of hand. Last week, I got a handwritten thank you letter, in Spanish, from a client in Bogotá, saying how grateful they were for my personal attention and cultural sensitivity. I had to ask my neighbor to help me translate it because I couldn't figure out what half of it said. It was beautiful. I cried. Then, yesterday, my boss told me that leadership is considering making me the head of a new bilingual marketing division that would oversee both English and Spanish campaigns across North America and parts of South America. She asked me to put together a vision document. In Spanish. I've created a monster. I can't sleep. I have flashcards taped all over my apartment. I jumped when I saw a telenovela commercial last night. I wake up conjugating verbs in my head. My dog has learned the word basta because I shouted at myself in the mirror. The cherry on top? Isabella asked if I wanted to join her and her family in Mexico this summer. For 2 weeks. 2 weeks. With her family. Who only speak Spanish. I said yes. What else could I do? Now I'm seriously considering quitting, changing my name, and moving to Canada. But instead, I just downloaded 5 new language apps and am actively researching how to fake a mild, non-life-threatening throat condition that renders me temporarily mute. On the bright side, I'm finally actually learning Spanish. Rapidly. Against my will. Through sheer terror. So yeah. I pretended to be bilingual to impress a girl, and now I'm one company-wide announcement away from being the face of corporate Hispanic outreach. If anyone needs me, I'll be rocking back and forth in my closet whispering irregular verb conjugations to myself. TIFU by trusting my smart home to take care of things while I went on vacation. So I, 32M, work in IT, which comes with a healthy dose of overconfidence in automation and smart devices. My girlfriend, 30F, and I planned a 2-week vacation to Greece, first real break in years, and I figured I'd put all the smart tech in my home to the test. Big mistake. Over the years I've decked out our modest 2-story house with every gadget I could get my hands on. smart lights, smart thermostat, smart security cameras, smart fridge, smart lock, smart watering system. I even have a smart litter box for our cat, Pepper, who would be staying with my sister while we were away. So before we left, I ran a full diagnostic through my home automation dashboard, scheduled everything, and left with full confidence that the house would take care of itself. The first few days in Greece were perfect. Sunsets in Santorini, wine tastings, zero stress. I occasionally checked the house cams and the system logs just for peace of mind. Everything seemed fine. On day 5, I got a push notification that the front door had opened. Weird, but not alarming. Maybe the neighbor I asked to bring in a package had arrived early. I messaged him, he hadn't. I opened the camera feed to see the door wide open, swaying gently in the breeze like a horror movie. No one in sight. I tried to remotely lock the smart door but it failed. I checked the logs again and saw that the door had unlocked itself due to a false positive on the facial recognition system. According to the system, a man matching my face had been standing at the door at 3:12 a.m. local time. I scrubbed through the footage and saw what looked like a pale distorted image, a glitch, maybe a weird reflection. Either way, the system thought it was me and unlocked the door. The lock then auto-disabled due to a potential malfunction and remained unlocked. I called my friend Nick, who lived nearby, and asked him to check it out. He found the door ajar, no signs of break-in or theft, and locked it manually. We chalked it up to a software bug. I updated the firmware from abroad, and moved on. 2 nights later, 3 a.m. again, I got another notification, watering system activated, Zone 4. Problem, Zone 4 is inside the house. It was a mislabeled valve in the basement laundry room I hadn't gotten around to fixing. I opened the camera feed to see a jet of water spraying from a wall pipe like an insane DIY water park. Turns out, the system had received a heat warning from the thermostat and thought the lawn needed emergency irrigation. The zone assignment had been accidentally routed to the old laundry valve I used to test the smart plumbing system a year ago. The real kicker? The smart thermostat wasn't detecting actual heat, it was responding to a sunbeam hitting the sensor through the window for an hour in the afternoon, which it interpreted as the house being 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The automated response kicked in, open windows, yep, automated, activate fans, and water zone 4 to cool things down. Water sprayed for a full 2 hours before I noticed. The basement was flooded. I had Nick rush back and shut off the main valve. I turned off remote controls and told every device in the house to shut the hell up. By now, I was deeply paranoid and slept with my phone volume on max, waiting for the next disaster. On day 10, the smart fridge sent a notification that food spoilage was imminent. I opened the fridge cam, yes, I have a fridge cam, and saw darkness. The fridge had somehow turned off. I checked the logs, temperature set to vacation eco mode, which it took literally and stopped cooling to save energy. I guess it assumed we were conserving food. The kicker? It automatically pushed all the perishables into the freezer assist drawer to try and save them, which then overheated due to the fridge's condenser failing from a clog in the filter. That drawer was a melted, moldy soup of dairy, meat, and broccoli sludge by the time Nick checked it. At this point, I just told Nick to unplug everything that could be unplugged and pray nothing else tried to be helpful. But we weren't done. The night before we flew back, I got one final notification from the smart litter box, which, remember, was empty because Pepper wasn't even there. The system reported unexpected waste detection. I checked the camera. A raccoon had somehow entered the house, probably when the door was ajar and never properly sealed again, and had made itself very comfortable. The AI tagged it as a large feline, activated the litter cleaning cycle, and the raccoon freaked out. It knocked over a smart lamp, which triggered a fall detection panic routine meant for elderly care. The system tried to call emergency services but failed due to a bug in the call script, which looped the phrase fall detected in zone bedroom into an infinite error message on screen. By the time we returned, the house was like a failed science experiment. A soggy, half-mildewed basement. A fridge that smelled like a crime scene. Scratches on the walls from the raccoon, which had escaped through a window the system helpfully opened for airflow optimization. Lights flickering from short circuits. The thermostat screen stuck in some language I couldn't recognize. It looked like Sanskrit but angrier. We spent the first 2 days back at home doing damage control and detechifying our lives. Every smart system got unplugged. I installed manual locks again. The fridge got replaced with a dumb one that just cools food and shuts the hell up. I even bought a good old-fashioned cat litter box. Pepper deserves it. Moral of the story? Just because you can automate everything doesn't mean you should. Especially not when your smart home thinks a raccoon is your cat, a shadow is your face, and a water pipe is a sprinkler. I wanted a house of the future. What I got was Skynet's idiot cousin with a leaky basement. TIFU by trying to surprise my wife with a secret bathroom renovation while she was on a work trip, so this happened a few months ago, but the shame is still fresh, and my friends haven't let me forget it. My wife, let's call her Sarah, had a week-long business trip to Seattle. We'd just bought our first house, and she kept saying how much she hated our guest bathroom. And to be fair, it was hideous. Like avocado green tile, a crusty toilet that always whistled after you flushed it, and a medicine cabinet that looked like it had been installed in 1972 and never cleaned since. I'd catch her scrolling Pinterest and showing me dreamy spa-like bathrooms with rainfall showers and white marble. I took notes. So while she was away, I decided to surprise her. I took the entire week off work. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so I could swing it, watched like 1,000 DIY bathroom videos on YouTube, and spent a day drawing out a plan. I budgeted $2000, which I quickly learned was laughably optimistic, but at the time I was pumped. Day 1, demolition. Everything had to go. I pulled out the toilet, sink, cabinets, and started prying off the tiles with a rented rotary hammer. I felt like a badass. Until I nicked a water line. Not a huge one, but enough to start spraying like a drunk fire hose. I panicked and ran to shut off the main valve, which I found behind a bush filled with spiders. After some very creative language and a soaked shirt, I got it shut off. Spent the rest of the night Googling how to fix a PEX line and eventually did a janky patch job with a clamp and a lot of plumber's tape. Day 2, I had to redo the subfloor because apparently the old toilet had been leaking slowly and rotting the wood underneath. It crumbled like wet cardboard when I stepped on it. This led to a 6-hour Home Depot run, during which I learned that I do not know the difference between plywood grades. Bought the wrong one, returned it, bought the right one, came home, and realized I left my keys inside. Climbed through the bathroom window like a burglar, scratched the hell out of my arm, but I was in. Finally installed the new subfloor at around 2 a.m. Day 3 was tile day. I had no experience tiling, but I watched so many tutorials that I was confident. Big mistake. I started at one end of the room instead of the center, so by the time I reached the other side, the tiles didn't line up with the wall. Had to rip them out and start over. Then I mixed the thin set too thick and it dried while I was still laying tiles, so some weren't fully set. When I tried to adjust one, it popped up and brought half the row with it. I genuinely sat down and considered just putting in carpet at that point. I took a day to regroup. Ordered pizza, sat on the couch, and questioned my life choices. Day 4, grouting. Messy, sticky, and I accidentally used sanded grout on the shower tiles, which scratched the surface of the porcelain. I didn't even know that was a thing until I posted a picture on Reddit, ironically, not here, asking for advice, and 5 people told me I'd basically ruined them. Decided to pretend it was an intentional, textured aesthetic. Moved on. Day 5, vanity and toilet install. The vanity was this modern floating design that Sarah loved. Problem, the studs weren't where I needed them to be. Solution, I tried to install a support bracket between studs using toggle bolts. Another mistake. One bolt slipped into the wall cavity and disappeared. Another one held until I actually put the vanity on it, and then it ripped right out. Left a gaping hole. I eventually found the studs and mounted it properly, but the wall looked like Swiss cheese by the time I finished. Now, the toilet. I'd bought a fancy dual-flush toilet with a slim tank, thinking it would match the modern minimalist vibe. I didn't realize the rough-in measurement was off by 2 inches. Instead of returning it, I tried to make it work. Got a flange extension and a wax ring stacker. I ended up with a toilet that rocked every time you sat on it like a plastic patio chair. I put shims under it and sealed it with caulk, hoping Sarah would never notice. Day 6, paint and finishing touches. I bought ocean mist paint that looked elegant in the store but turned baby blue on the wall. Tried to convince myself it was beachy and chill. Hung a mirror that was way too heavy for the drywall anchors I used. It fell the next morning and cracked the sink. Yes, cracked. The sink. Day 7, panic cleaning. I patched the wall where the mirror fell, painted over my mistakes, scrubbed the grout lines with a toothbrush, and lit a candle that smelled like eucalyptus to make it feel like a spa. I even printed out a dumb little sign that said "Take a deep breath, you're home," and framed it. Sarah came home that evening. I led her to the bathroom, brimming with nervous pride. Her expression was complex. She said wow in that tone where you don't know if someone's amazed or horrified. She walked around silently, ran her fingers over the tile, looked at the uneven caulking, tested the faucet, which sputtered like a dying fish, sat on the toilet, which still rocked slightly, and then looked at me and said, "Did you do this all by yourself?" I nodded, grinning like a kid who just made a Lego tower. She smiled. And then laughed. Not in a cruel way, more like in disbelief. "You are insane," she said, and kissed me. "But this is actually kind of amazing. In a chaotic, slightly dangerous way. It's been a few months now. The bathroom mostly works. We ended up hiring a contractor to fix the worst parts, the tile around the tub and the toilet flange, mostly, but Sarah still uses it every day. The mirror is bolted into studs now. The cracked sink got replaced. The blue walls grew on us. The rocking toilet became a family joke. But I've learned something important: surprises are great, but maybe not when they involve plumbing, tiling, and the laws of physics. TIFU by pretending to be a dog trainer to impress a girl and accidentally getting hired by a millionaire. So, this happened about a month ago, and I still have no idea how I got through it without getting sued, mauled, or exposed as the fraud I am. It all started when I matched with this girl Emma, on Hinge. Gorgeous, funny, and a self-proclaimed dog lover. Her profile had photos of her and her golden retriever doing hikes, agility courses, even a Halloween costume contest. One of her prompts said, "You should leave a comment if you know how to handle a high-energy dog." And like an idiot, I thought, you know what? I do know how to handle a high-energy dog. I've watched a lot of Cesar Millan videos. So I messaged her, "High-energy dogs? Please." I train Belgian Malinois for military drills on the weekends. Now, to be clear, I have never trained a dog. The closest I've come is teaching my childhood beagle not to poop under the piano. But something about the way she responded with, "OMG, seriously? That's amazing. You must be so patient," triggered my inner conman. I leaned in hard. Told her I worked with select private clients and did behavioral rehab for rescue dogs. I even threw in some fake terms like structured empathy training and dominance recalibration protocol, which, I kid you not, I made up on the spot. Fast forward a week. We're getting along great. She wants to meet in person, but there's a catch: her friend's boss has this psycho dog, a Doberman named Apollo, who's apparently untrainable. The guy has tried 3 different professional trainers, and the dog bit one of them. Emma tells her friend I'm a military tier whisperer and, suddenly, I'm being begged to just meet the dog and see what you think. I should have come clean right then. I should have said, "Hey, just kidding, I've only trained a beagle," and lied because I liked you. But the guy offering to pay me $500 for one session was a tech millionaire with an estate outside the city and security cameras everywhere. I had a warped thought like, I'll go, pretend to evaluate the dog, say it's beyond hope, collect $500, and get out. I drive to this guy's place the next Saturday. Giant iron gates. A long-ass driveway. I roll up and he's standing there with Apollo, who looks like he wants to kill and or bench press me. The guy, we'll call him Darren, introduces himself, shakes my hand, and says, just be careful, he's unpredictable. I plaster on a fake calmness and say, that's okay. I specialize in red zone cases. What the hell does red zone even mean? I think I heard it on a dog show once. Apollo starts barking and lunging at me, and I swear my soul left my body for a second. I whip out the only trick I remembered from a video, avoid eye contact and stand still. Shockingly, Apollo eventually chills out and sniffs me. Darren looks amazed. Wow. He's never done that. Most people can't get near him. So now I'm stuck. He invites me in. Tells me Apollo has bitten a mailman, eaten part of a couch, and nearly broke through a fence to attack a neighbor's cat. He's a nightmare, Darren says. But I don't want to give up on him. Instead of bailing, I hear myself say, I can work with him. It'll take 3 weeks, maybe 4. But I'll need full control. Why? Why would I say that? So now I'm on the hook for multiple sessions. Darren offers me $2000 if I can fix Apollo. I accept. I have no idea what I'm doing. The next 3 weeks are a blur of chaos. I start binge-watching every dog training video on YouTube, Kickapup, Zach George, random Russian trainers with 240p footage and terrifying dogs. I buy a clicker, some treats, even a fake trainer polo shirt online. I show up to Darren's house 3 times a week and just kind of wing it. I reward Apollo for not biting me. I say yes, in a chipper voice like the videos say. I throw in long leash walks, random focus drills, and feed him from my hand like I'm his mother. And here's the insane part, it actually starts working. Apollo isn't cured, but he stops lunging. He sits when I ask. He comes when called. I have no idea why, it's either the placebo effect, or he can smell my fear and pities me. Darren is thrilled. He calls me a miracle worker. He gives me the full $2000 and says, I have some friends who need help. Can I pass your name along? I panic and say I'm fully booked for months. Then I ghost Darren. I ghost Emma. I nuke my Hinge account. Fast forward to last week, I'm at a coffee shop and I overhear a woman talking about how her boss's dog went from Cujo to Lassie in a month thanks to some dog guru named Nate. I almost choked on my muffin. Now I live in fear. Fear that one of Darren's friends will track me down. Fear that Apollo will snap and I'll get blamed. Fear that I'll somehow get roped into training dogs professionally and run out of YouTube videos to fake it with. But also, sometimes I think about how Apollo looked at me on the last day, wagging his tail like I wasn't a total imposter, and I wonder, am I kinda good at this? No. I'm not. I'm a fraud. But I do have $2000, a polo shirt, and the most unhinged story to tell on Reddit. TIFU by accidentally making my girlfriend think I was planning to propose in the worst way possible. So, here's how it all went down. I'm a guy who tends to overthink everything, especially when it comes to big decisions. You know, like whether or not to bring up a minor argument from 2 weeks ago. I'm the kind of guy who won't buy something unless I read 100 reviews and double-check every return policy. So, when it came time to plan a special evening with my girlfriend, I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to do something meaningful, but I didn't want it to seem like I was rushing anything, especially when it came to the topic of marriage. Let me backtrack a little. We've been together for about 2 years now. Things have been going great, and while we've had conversations about our future together, I was nowhere near ready to pop the question. But, as time went on, I began to entertain the thought. Was I really ready? Should I start thinking of how I could propose in a way that's unique and memorable? You know, nothing too flashy, but still something meaningful. So, I started getting subtle hints about her taste in jewelry. I know, it sounds like a small thing, but I had no idea what kind of engagement ring she'd like when the time came. She had mentioned a few times that she loved vintage rings. She also casually mentioned how she had always dreamed of a proposal in a quiet, intimate setting, nothing over the top. She hated the idea of a public proposal, and for some reason, that stuck with me. It sounded like a plan I could work with. Around this time, we had a weekend getaway planned. It was supposed to be a casual trip to the beach to relax, eat good food, and enjoy each other's company. But in my overthinking mind, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to make a huge romantic gesture without her expecting anything. This was it. I could make this trip memorable for both of us. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just wait until you were actually ready to propose before planning something? The answer is, I honestly thought I was ready to do something special that might hint at a proposal, but not actually propose. Big mistake. I got the idea to plan a fake proposal for the weekend. What I meant was, I thought it would be hilarious and adorable to create an illusion of a proposal without actually committing to it. I would set up a small, romantic scene by the beach, complete with candles and some soft music, and let her think I was going to propose. But, then I'd reveal that it was all a big joke, and she'd laugh, and we'd talk about our future plans. It'd be cute, right? I spent days researching how to create the most believable fake proposal ever. I even watched proposal videos on YouTube to study body language and the emotional reactions of people who got proposed to. I bought a small, fake ring from a costume store, nothing expensive, just a placeholder, because I didn't want to use a real ring and accidentally give her the wrong impression. The night of the getaway, I told her I had a surprise planned for her. We took a walk along the beach, and as we neared the spot I had set up, I felt my nerves begin to take over. I had chosen a secluded part of the beach where there weren't many people around, and there was a gentle breeze that made everything feel even more romantic. I had strategically placed some candles and lanterns around a towel where we'd sit, and I brought a portable speaker to play some soft, romantic music. As we approached the spot, I could see the confusion in her face. She asked, "What's all this?" I smiled and said, "I thought we'd just have a quiet moment together." She smiled back, but I could tell something was off. She was starting to feel the tension in the air, and that was when I realized I hadn't done a very good job at hiding the fact that something was about to happen. We sat down on the towel, and I pulled out the fake ring from my pocket, holding it in front of her. I said, "Okay, now before you say anything, I just wanted to let you know that I've been thinking a lot about us. You know, we've been together for a while now, and I've been planning a surprise for you. I really want us to talk about our future. What do you think about marriage?" She looked at me, confused. "Wait, what? Are you proposing?" I instantly realized the disaster that was unfolding. The fake proposal was starting to look like the real thing, and I hadn't prepared myself for the emotional toll it would take on both of us. Before I could clarify that this wasn't a real proposal, her face drained of color. She looked around, as if to make sure no one else was around to see her reaction. The candles flickered eerily in the night, and the music, which was supposed to be romantic, suddenly felt too loud. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling. No, it's not what you think," I stammered. "I was just trying to make it a nice moment. I wanted us to talk about where we're headed, but I didn't want to surprise you in the wrong way. I'm not ready to propose yet, I just thought it'd be a funny, light-hearted thing to do." She stared at me, speechless. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Her expression changed from shock to disappointment. I could feel my face turning red as I scrambled to explain myself. "I didn't mean to freak you out, I swear. I wasn't going to propose tonight. I just wanted to do something cute." At this point, she stood up abruptly, backing away a little. You thought it would be cute? To make me think you were going to propose when you weren't even planning on it? I was trying to salvage the situation, but nothing was working. I kept repeating that it wasn't a real proposal, that I wasn't ready for that step yet, but all she could say was, I don't know if I can even trust this now. The rest of the evening was ruined. We went back to the hotel in complete silence. She was visibly upset, and I felt like the biggest idiot in the world. I had tried to make something lighthearted and fun, but it ended up backfiring spectacularly. That night, we had a long conversation. She told me how confused and hurt she was by my actions. She said that it felt like I was trying to manipulate her emotions, making her think that we were on the brink of something major when I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I apologized 1,000 times, but I could tell that my attempt to joke about marriage had seriously damaged her trust in me. After a lot of back and forth, we agreed to take a break from discussing our future for a while. We had a long road of rebuilding our communication ahead of us. I learned the hard way that if I ever do decide to propose, it won't be some kind of prank or funny moment. It'll be real. It'll be about both of us, not just me trying to impress her with some over-the-top stunt. Needless to say, I'm still not sure when the right time for a proposal will be. But I do know one thing, my attempts at being clever and creative almost ruined my relationship. And for that, I'll always feel like a complete idiot. TLDR, tried to pull off a fake proposal as a joke during a beach getaway, thought it'd be funny, but ended up making my girlfriend think I was serious. It completely backfired, and I learned a painful lesson about rushing things in a relationship. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my apartment while trying to cook dinner. It all started on a regular Tuesday evening. I had just finished a long day of work and was looking forward to a quiet night at home. My kitchen was fairly basic, a small, slightly outdated apartment setup, but it worked. I had a couple of friends coming over the following weekend, and I had promised them I would cook a fancy dinner as a way to show off my culinary skills, which, to be honest, were extremely limited. But hey, I figured if I could manage to make pasta and not burn it, I could tackle a few simple dishes. This particular Tuesday, I was determined to make a homemade stir-fry, something I'd seen on YouTube. It looked simple enough: chop vegetables, throw them in a pan with some oil, add some soy sauce, and boom, dinner. Easy, right? The night began innocuously enough. I pulled out all the ingredients I had bought the day before: chicken, bell peppers, onions, some zucchini, soy sauce, and a bottle of sesame oil. I wasn't exactly a master chef, but I figured this would be a nice, safe start to get myself into the whole adulting thing. After all, I had made spaghetti before, so how hard could it be? I pulled the chicken out of the fridge and started cutting it up into cubes. It wasn't until I turned the stove on to heat the pan that I realized my mistake. You see, I had been using the stove for reheating leftovers and boiling water for months, but I had never actually tried to cook anything more complicated. I had never used the high heat function. And I definitely hadn't realized that my cheap non-stick frying pan had a tendency to overheat, especially when combined with sesame oil. It wasn't long before I started noticing the smell. At first, it wasn't alarming, just a slight smoky scent, nothing I couldn't deal with. But then it started getting stronger. A lot stronger. I turned around to see a thin wisp of smoke rising from the pan. I was too focused on chopping the vegetables to notice that the oil was beginning to burn. This was when I made the first mistake. Instead of turning the heat down, I panicked and added more oil, thinking that would help things. Spoiler, it didn't. Within seconds, the kitchen was filled with thick, black smoke. It was at this moment I realized I had no idea what I was doing. I looked at the pan, then back at the smoke billowing into my face. A quick glance to the smoke detector told me that the worst was yet to come. It was only a matter of time before the loud, screeching alarm went off, sending me into a panic mode I didn't know I was capable of. I grabbed the pan, not thinking straight, and tried to lift it off the stove. That was mistake number 2. The pan was way too hot for me to handle properly, and as I attempted to move it, I brushed against the edge of the stove, knocking over a plastic bag of garbage I had left on the counter. It was in that moment the disaster truly began. The bag fell, spilling its contents, some empty food containers, plastic wrappers, and a random assortment of junk, onto the floor, which, naturally, set some of the plastic on fire. I didn't even realize at first, as I was still focused on the pan. But when I heard the unmistakable sound of crackling flames, my blood ran cold. I looked down and saw the mess of plastic slowly catching fire. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a moment where you're faced with a burning building, or in this case, apartment, but let me tell you, I completely froze. I didn't know if I should grab the fire extinguisher, call 911, or just run. For some reason, my brain completely short-circuited. I turned off the stove, finally, but the fire on the plastic continued to spread across the floor. I panicked and grabbed a towel, thinking I could smother it, like in the movies. But instead of putting out the fire, I just ended up swatting at the air and knocking a few more things over in the process. By now, the smoke alarm was blaring, and I could hear the distinct sound of it setting off in the hallway. I wasn't the only one who was about to have their evening ruined. The entire building would soon be awakened by the shrill sound of my failure. I quickly realized that the fire wasn't going to stop on its own, and I definitely wasn't going to be able to stop it with a towel. In the sheer panic of the moment, I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered quickly, and I barely got the words "fire in my apartment" out before she was telling me to evacuate the building. "Do you have a fire extinguisher?" she asked, and I felt my stomach drop. I didn't own one. I knew I should have had one, but I didn't. That was another one of those "I'll get it tomorrow" thoughts that never came to fruition. The dispatcher told me to leave and wait outside, but I was too embarrassed to leave the apartment. I wasn't exactly proud of how badly I had handled the situation, so I briefly debated whether I should just quietly disappear and hope it magically fixed itself. But the fire was only getting worse. I rushed outside in a panic, still holding the phone to my ear, and stood in the stairwell, waiting for the fire department to arrive. The smoke from the building had already started to billow out, and I could hear sirens in the distance. The fire department showed up in record time, and within minutes, they had their gear on and were rushing up to my apartment. I was left standing outside, half worried my entire life was about to go up in flames, and half feeling completely foolish. I'm pretty sure the entire building knew who the idiot was by the time the firefighters finished putting out the blaze. They had the fire under control fairly quickly, but my apartment, while not completely destroyed, had a noticeable layer of smoke damage. The fire itself was contained to the plastic bags and the small part of the floor they had burned, but the smell lingered for weeks. The firefighters were actually pretty cool about it, offering some words of advice about fire safety and checking to make sure there were no other hot spots in the apartment. I don't know what I was expecting, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't for them to act like it wasn't the first time they'd been called to a scene where someone almost burned down their apartment while trying to cook dinner. So now I'm that guy. The one who set a fire while trying to cook stir-fry. The one who didn't know the difference between high heat and a reasonable cooking temperature. The one who now gets to explain to anyone who visits my apartment why it smells a little like burnt plastic for the first few minutes they're inside. Lesson learned: don't trust a recipe from YouTube if you don't know how to cook. And always have a fire extinguisher on hand. I'm lucky the fire didn't spread further, but the whole ordeal could have ended much worse than it did. Oh, and the worst part? I still don't know how to cook stir-fry. But I'm thinking of sticking to microwave meals for a while. TIFU by forgetting to check my gas tank before heading out on a road trip and getting stranded in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country with no cell service. It all started when I decided to take a spontaneous road trip across the border into Mexico. I had been living in Texas for a few years, and I had heard so many great things about the small coastal towns in Mexico that I figured it was finally time to see them for myself. My plan was simple: drive down, enjoy the beach, maybe get some fresh seafood, and just unwind for a few days. I was alone, but I didn't mind. I enjoy traveling solo, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to explore at my own pace. I packed my car, made sure I had all the documents for the border crossing, and even double-checked my route on Google Maps. I was in the perfect mood, excited and ready for an adventure. The drive down was beautiful. The vast Texas landscape gave way to the vibrant colors of Mexico as I crossed the border. Everything was going perfectly until it wasn't. It was about 2 p.m. when I pulled into a small, charming town somewhere in northern Mexico. I hadn't really thought much about fuel because my gas gauge was hovering just above half full, so I wasn't concerned. I figured I had more than enough gas to get me to my next stop, which was about 50 miles away. I stopped at a local market, grabbed some snacks, and decided to stretch my legs for a bit. I wasn't in a rush, and the day was warm, so I soaked in the atmosphere of the little town. After a leisurely break, I got back into my car, turned on some music, and started heading toward the coast. I'd been driving for about an hour when the car started acting funny. The engine sputtered, and the sound of the car's motor became erratic. I immediately started to panic, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a fluke, right? It had happened before when I was running low on gas, but I didn't think that was the issue. I had half a tank of fuel, after all. About 10 minutes later, the car lurched again, and the dashboard flashed a warning light, something about fuel. My stomach sank. I had made a huge mistake. I hadn't checked the tank before leaving the market. That half tank was probably mostly air. I quickly glanced at the GPS to check if there was a gas station nearby. There wasn't. I pulled off to the side of the road and turned off the car, hoping for a miracle. There I was, in the middle of nowhere, on a stretch of highway with nothing around but scrubby desert, cacti, and a few distant mountains. No gas stations, no towns, no nothing. Just the sun beating down on me and my rapidly depleting phone battery. The first few minutes were filled with shock. I kept looking at the fuel gauge, willing it to go back up, as if that would somehow make a difference. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I checked my phone, and of course, no service. No cell bars, no Wi-Fi, not even a faint signal. Just complete radio silence. I started thinking of possible solutions, but all my ideas were useless. I could try to walk to a nearby town, but I had no idea how far away that might be. Besides, the heat was unbearable, and I'd need water for such a walk. I didn't have any extra water in my car, just the snacks I had grabbed from the market earlier. At this point, the reality of the situation started to set in. I was stranded, in a foreign country, with no gas, no service, and no real idea of how to get help. I debated trying to flag down someone driving by, but I wasn't sure how safe that would be. I didn't know the area, didn't know the people, and didn't want to end up in a situation worse than the one I was already in. I decided to try to conserve what little battery I had left on my phone by using it only for emergency purposes. I used my last few minutes of phone life to try calling the roadside assistance number on my insurance card. Of course, nothing happened. The call wouldn't go through. That was when I realized that I was truly on my own in this situation. Hours passed, and the temperature climbed higher. I kept my windows down to try to get some air circulation, but it didn't really help. The only thing I could think of was how dumb I was for not checking the gas before leaving the market. There was nothing I could do now but wait. I sat there, sweating and uncomfortable, watching as a few cars passed by. Every time a car came close, I felt a surge of hope, only to watch them zoom past without so much as slowing down. Of course, I had no way of flagging them down either, as there was no shoulder to pull onto, just a narrow, cracked road. Eventually, just as I was starting to lose hope, I saw a car in the distance. This one looked different, though. It wasn't speeding past. It slowed down as it approached, and I could see that it was a family in an SUV. My heart skipped a beat. This was my chance. I waved frantically, praying they would stop. To my relief, the car pulled up alongside mine. The driver, a man in his mid-40s, rolled down the window. He looked at me with a concerned expression. ¿Necesitas ayuda?" he asked in Spanish, which I barely understood. I nodded desperately and tried to explain in broken Spanish that I had run out of gas and didn't know what to do. Thankfully, the man seemed to understand, and he said they would help me. He spoke a little English, so he explained that they were on their way to a nearby town and could give me a ride to the nearest gas station. I almost cried with relief. After everything, I wasn't alone anymore. The man's wife and daughter waited in the car while I hopped into the SUV. The family was kind and patient, and even though we didn't share much of a common language, the gratitude I felt for them was clear. We made our way to the town, and the entire time, I kept thinking about how lucky I was that they had stopped. I couldn't believe I had almost been stuck out there for days, just because I hadn't bothered to check the gas tank before starting the trip. When we finally reached the gas station, I couldn't get out of the car fast enough. I thanked them profusely, offering them money for their trouble, but they refused, insisting it was nothing. I refueled my car and, after making sure I had enough to get back, I waved goodbye to the family and set off on my way again. I learned my lesson that day: always check your fuel before embarking on a journey, especially when you're in unfamiliar territory. It's been a few years since that trip, and every time I get into my car, I still check the gas gauge twice before I drive anywhere. And honestly, I still think about that family who stopped to help me. Sometimes, the kindness of strangers is all you need to turn a disaster into an unforgettable experience. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. So, it all started last Thursday, when I decided to invite a few friends over for a casual get-together at my place. I had recently moved into a new apartment and was eager to show it off. After weeks of dealing with contractors and settling in, I thought it was the perfect time to unwind and get everyone together. It wasn't going to be anything fancy, just some drinks, music, and good company. What could go wrong, right? I was feeling pretty confident about the whole thing. I had made sure the place looked presentable, tidied up the living room, set up the kitchen with some snacks and finger foods, and even cleaned the bathroom, though I secretly still wasn't sure about the shower curtain. I had been on a bit of a health kick recently, so I made sure to get some healthier options, too, like hummus and veggies. I even prepped a small selection of low-calorie cocktails for those who were into that sort of thing. The stage was set. Around 6 p.m., the first couple of friends arrived. We greeted each other, caught up a little, and I offered them some drinks. Everything was going great, everyone was laughing, chatting, and sipping their drinks. Then, around 7:30, my friend Darren showed up. Now, Darren is, well, let's just say he's the life of the party. He's the guy who gets everyone to do things they probably wouldn't do on their own, whether it's singing karaoke, doing shots, or, in this case, suggesting we play a drinking game. We all agreed it would be a fun idea, so Darren went into my kitchen, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of tequila. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, I knew Darren liked tequila, but I didn't realize that when Darren says drinking game, it means you're about to get too drunk. He started explaining the rules, and even though it felt a little bit excessive, we all decided to go along with it. For context, the game involved everyone taking turns picking a card from a deck that Darren brought. Each card had a specific challenge or action written on it, some of which required a drink, others involved ridiculous stunts, and a few that were just downright bizarre. As we progressed, the game became more competitive, and the drinks kept flowing. Now, I wasn't a big drinker, but I kept pace with everyone. I wasn't going to be the one who bailed out early. It wasn't long before the room started feeling a bit spinny, but I wasn't going to let on that I was struggling. That's when things started to go downhill, fast. Around 9 p.m., I drew a card that said, "Take a shot, then do a cartwheel." Normally, I'd have laughed this off, but given the state I was in, I was feeling way more confident than I should have. I had done cartwheels as a kid, so I figured, how hard could it be? Sure, I hadn't tried it in years, but my balance felt okay, and my body still had the muscle memory, right? Wrong. I downed the shot and stood up, trying to find a bit of space in the middle of the living room. Everyone gathered around, cheering me on, which only encouraged my ill-fated decision. I bent down to get ready for the cartwheel, and before I even knew it, I was upside down, except that I didn't have the strength to complete the rotation. Instead of a graceful flip, I went into a full spin, my legs shooting out from underneath me as I crashed into the coffee table. The coffee table, in turn, tipped over, knocking over a large vase that had been sitting on the edge, sending it plummeting to the floor. At that exact moment, the front door to the apartment opened. My landlord, Mr. Jenkins, who had come by unexpectedly to drop off a package for me. He was not pleased to find a bunch of drunk people stumbling around my apartment, my coffee table broken, and me sprawled out on the floor like a human wrecking ball. But the chaos didn't stop there. As I tried to get back up, I noticed that one of my friends, Claire, had been laughing so hard that she had knocked over the snack bowl, and a half-eaten bag of chips had fallen into the dip. As I reached for the chips to salvage what was left, I knocked over a bottle of wine, which spilled onto my brand-new rug. At this point, my face was red, not from the embarrassment of my failed cartwheel, but from the sheer panic setting in. Mr. Jenkins stood there, looking like he had just walked into a war zone. I tried to explain, but words weren't exactly coming out in a coherent order. He just sighed and muttered something about how he didn't have time for this, before turning to leave. As he reached the door, I suddenly remembered something. I had forgotten to pay the rent for this month. I had planned on doing it online, but got distracted by the party prep. I called out to him, but he was already gone. I spent the next 10 minutes awkwardly apologizing to my friends and trying to clean up the mess, but it felt like the damage was already done. The tequila had hit me harder than I thought, and as I cleaned up the shattered vase, I realized I had a very real possibility of being kicked out of my apartment. It wasn't exactly the social debut I had envisioned for my new place. By the time everyone left around midnight, I was left sitting on the couch, surrounded by broken glass, spilled wine, and a general sense of utter defeat. The fun, carefree evening had turned into a disaster. To top it off, my phone buzzed with a reminder that my rent was due in 2 days, which only made me more stressed. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like a small construction project was taking place inside my skull. I had no idea how I was going to explain the mess to Mr. Jenkins or how to get my life back on track after the chaos. When I called him later that day to apologize, he was surprisingly understanding. He mentioned that he would give me an extension on the rent, but he still needed to inspect the damage to the apartment. I promised him that I'd take care of it, but inside, I knew I was in deep trouble. At least I learned one thing from this whole fiasco: never, ever trust Darren with a deck of cards and tequila again. I'm still not sure what the full extent of the damage is, but at least I've got a good story to tell. So, if you're planning a get-together anytime soon, remember, tequila and cartwheels don't mix, and neither do unexpected visits from your landlord. TIFU by accidentally setting my house on fire during a simple DIY project. So, I've always been one of those people who watches YouTube videos and thinks, hey, that looks easy. I could totally do that. I'm pretty handy, or at least, I like to think I am. I mean, I've fixed a couple of leaky faucets, hung a few shelves, and even installed a new light fixture once. So when I decided to finally tackle a more ambitious project, installing a new backsplash in my kitchen, I figured it was going to be no big deal. The plan was simple. I'd rip out the old backsplash tiles, put up some new ones, and call it a day. I watched about 3 or 4 videos on how to do it, bought all the materials I thought I would need, and dove right in. I wasn't nervous or anything, just a little excited to see how it turned out. It was a Saturday, and I had the whole day free, so I figured this would be the perfect time to finally get this done. Spoiler, it was not the perfect time. I started by removing the old backsplash tiles. This went fine for the first few tiles, but as I got deeper into the project, I realized the previous homeowner had used some serious adhesive to stick those tiles down. I started chipping away at them with a hammer and chisel. I didn't think it would be as difficult as it was, but after an hour of sweating and struggling, I got most of them off. The rest of the process went about as expected, cleaning up the mess, prepping the wall, and getting everything ready to put down the new adhesive and tiles. Now, the adhesive I bought wasn't the traditional glue type. It was some heavy-duty stuff, supposedly extra strong for areas like kitchens where things get wet all the time. But it also came with the warning, extremely flammable until cured. Of course, I skimmed over that part because I'm a DIY idiot and thought, that's just standard boilerplate warning stuff. Nothing to worry about. I didn't think it through, at all. I laid down the adhesive, just like the video said, and started positioning the tiles. It was a bit trickier than I thought. The spacing wasn't quite right, so I had to pull some tiles off and reposition them. That's when I made my first major mistake. I had a little handheld butane torch lighter nearby because I thought it might help to melt the adhesive a bit to make it easier to work with. I wasn't sure if it was necessary, but the guy in the video did it, so I figured it was worth a try. Plus, it was a cool-looking torch, so I was kind of excited to use it. I started torching the adhesive with this little flame, making tiny adjustments as I went. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. The flame was small, so it didn't seem dangerous. It was just a small lighter, right? But as I continued working, I started to get the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The air smelled weird, like plastic burning. I stopped for a second, thinking, maybe it's just the adhesive reacting. But no, it kept getting stronger. And then I noticed it. A small flame. At first, I thought I was just imagining it. But then it spread, and that's when I realized, holy crap, my kitchen was on fire. At first, I panicked. My brain short-circuited for a second. I didn't know what to do. I thought about grabbing a towel and throwing it over the flames, but I knew that wasn't going to work. I thought about grabbing a fire extinguisher, but then realized I didn't even have one. Big mistake number 2. In my panic, I accidentally kicked over a bottle of paint thinner that I had sitting near the counter. It spilled onto the floor and only made the situation worse. That's when I knew this was way past the point of no return. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator picked up, and I was barely coherent. I'm on fire, my kitchen's on fire. I managed to stammer out. She calmly walked me through the steps of evacuating the house and getting to safety. I couldn't believe this was happening. In a span of just a few minutes, I went from a perfectly fine Saturday afternoon to watching my kitchen fill up with smoke. The fire department arrived in what felt like an eternity. They were amazing, honestly. They took care of everything, putting out the flames and ensuring nothing else would catch fire. Thankfully, the fire didn't spread to the rest of the house. But my kitchen was destroyed. The counters were scorched, the walls were burned, and the whole room smelled like smoke. The damage was bad enough that they had to tear down the drywall and the cabinets to make sure there were no lingering embers. Now, you'd think this is where the story ends, right? But no. The real kicker came a few days later when the insurance adjuster came over to assess the damage. As I'm explaining what happened, I realized that I had probably voided my insurance policy by causing the fire myself. Apparently, the combination of the butane torch and highly flammable adhesive made for a perfect storm of disaster. I learned the hard way that trying to improvise with tools I didn't fully understand was a huge mistake. In the end, my insurance company refused to cover the damages because of my negligence. So, not only did I destroy my kitchen, but I also got stuck with a hefty bill for the repairs that I couldn't even afford. The entire experience ended up costing me way more than hiring a professional would have in the first place. Lesson learned: if you're going to take on a DIY project, maybe don't mix fire and flammable chemicals in your kitchen. And for the love of God, always check if your insurance covers DIY disasters before you start torching things. Also, maybe leave the complicated stuff to the professionals. In conclusion, my simple kitchen makeover turned into a full-blown disaster. I'd like to think I've learned my lesson, but part of me still wants to get a new DIY project going. Maybe I'll just stick to something safer, like building a birdhouse, as long as it doesn't involve fire. TIFU by forgetting my mom's birthday, and making it much worse by trying to cover it up. So, I've always had a bit of a reputation for being forgetful, but I never thought it would come to this. My mom's birthday is a pretty big deal in our family, especially because she's the kind of person who makes you feel like you're the most important person in the world on your birthday. She's always thinking about everyone else, always caring, always sending cards, giving thoughtful presents, all of it. So, naturally, I wanted to make sure this year was special for her. Well, fast forward to a week before her birthday, and I get the text from my sister. It was a simple message: "What do you want to get Mom for her birthday?" My heart dropped into my stomach. Because I had completely forgotten her birthday was coming up. Like, entirely forgot. For some reason, I had convinced myself it was in 2 weeks. So, in a panic, I start scrambling to get something, anything, to give her as a gift. The thing is, I'm the type of person who genuinely has no clue what to buy anyone for any occasion. I'm horrible at gifts. I'm the person who ends up buying the default gift for everyone, gift cards, flowers, or whatever the latest random trend is. So I started searching for last-minute gifts that could somehow convey the sentiment that I really cared, despite the fact I'd been too busy with life to remember the date. In the days leading up to her birthday, I sent her a few texts, pretending everything was totally normal. I didn't even mention the fact that I was struggling to figure out what to buy. I was trying to act cool, like I had everything under control. I thought maybe I could just order something online, have it shipped to her, and it would arrive just in time. Perfect plan, right? Wrong. Fast forward to the morning of her birthday. It's the day of, and I still don't have anything for her. The panic is setting in. I get a text from my mom early in the morning wishing me a good day, and I immediately realize what an absolute idiot I am. She's up at 7 a.m., probably already planning a full day of festivities, and here I am scrambling, trying to figure out how to salvage this whole situation. I tried to come up with something quick. Okay, I'll send her a heartfelt message. Yeah, that's a good idea. I spend the next 20 minutes typing out a message that's probably way too long and dramatic for a text. Something like, "Mom, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you and how lucky I am to have you in my life. You've always been there for me, and I don't know how I could have gotten this far without you." You know, the standard guilt-tripping "I love you" message. I hit send. Then, I finally found a gift that could work, kind of. It was an online order for one of those personalized photo books, where you upload pictures and create a custom story. I thought, perfect. This'll show how much I care, but then I realized I missed the cutoff date for same-day delivery. The delivery window said it would arrive next week, panic level 1000. I couldn't let this happen, so I had to come up with something else. What did I do? I texted my mom again. This time, I said, "Hey, I got you something, but it's not going to arrive until next week. Don't worry, it's going to be worth the wait. I promise." I felt sick as I sent it, but at least I had a bit of cover. Now I just had to figure out a way to make the rest of the day seem normal. She replied, "That's okay, I'm just happy to be with you today." The guilt hit me hard. She was so sweet and forgiving, which, looking back, should have been my red flag. But instead of just owning up to my mistake, I decided to try and push the charade further. I started planning things for the day. I suggested we go out for lunch, just to keep the day rolling. I told her I'd found a cool new restaurant and that I had a surprise for her there. In reality, I had no idea where to go, but I knew I couldn't take her somewhere basic, she'd totally see through it. So, I scrolled through Yelp for an hour looking for some random, fancy-sounding place that had good reviews. I finally found a spot with a name like the Golden Clover and told her to meet me there. At this point, I was basically running on caffeine and anxiety. I get to the restaurant 15 minutes early to make sure everything looks good. When my mom shows up, I immediately start acting way too enthusiastic. I'm talking about how amazing this place is and how much I've been looking forward to it. My mom's being super chill, like, "It's fine, I'm just happy to be spending the day with you." We sit down, and she starts casually asking, "What's the special today?" I freeze. I have no idea what the special is. I wasn't even sure this place was legitimate. I tried to play it cool, but I could feel the beads of sweat on the back of my neck. So, I did what any desperate person would do in this situation, I lied. "Oh, it's the lobster bisque. It's amazing, you have to try it." The waiter comes over, and I confidently say, "We'll take the lobster bisque, please." He looks at me confused, then checks the menu. "Sir, the bisque is actually off the menu today. We're only serving the seafood chowder." My heart drops. I panic, and my brain immediately starts scrambling. Oh, that's what I meant. The chowder is the one with the lobster flavor. That's why it's so good. The waiter just nods awkwardly, probably thinking I'm insane, and walks off to get our order. I can tell my mom's starting to get suspicious. She's giving me this look, and I'm doing my best to keep the conversation flowing, but it's clear she knows something's off. At this point, I can't even keep my story straight, so I just stop talking about the restaurant and steer the conversation to something safe, how I was planning something big for her birthday. Yeah, a surprise you can't know about yet. Lunch ends. We leave the restaurant. My mom, ever the trooper, insists it was the best birthday ever. We hug goodbye, and I try to keep the illusion going. I tell her we'll celebrate again when her gift arrives. As I walk back to my car, the weight of the situation really starts to settle in. I've managed to completely botch my mom's birthday, from forgetting the day to lying about plans and meals. But I didn't give up. I'll figure something out, right? I mean, it's never too late to fix things, right? Anyway, this whole disaster got me thinking. Maybe next year, I'll just mark my mom's birthday on my calendar in advance, and maybe, just maybe, I'll plan ahead. TIFU by accidentally sending my ex a text message meant for my new girlfriend. A little background, I'm a 28-year-old guy, recently out of a 2-year relationship with my ex, Emily. It was a messy breakup, and we're now what you would call amicably estranged. We don't talk much, but we still follow each other on social media, and I guess there's always that awkward feeling when you run into someone from your past. A couple of months ago, I started seeing someone new, Rachel. She's amazing, and I've really been enjoying getting to know her. Things are going well, better than I could have hoped, actually. Anyway, last night was when everything went sideways. Rachel and I had made plans for a cozy dinner at my place. I decided to cook, and being the terrible chef I am, I was a bit nervous about pulling it off. So, I got a bit ahead of myself in the preparations. I had everything laid out, ingredients, a recipe I found online, and an overly ambitious vision of what my cooking skills could achieve. I sent Rachel a text around 6 p.m. that read, "Hey babe, the meal is almost ready. I can't wait to see you tonight." So, at this point, I'm in full chef mode, multitasking in the kitchen. I'm stirring the sauce, checking the oven, setting the table, and texting Rachel every now and then to keep the mood light. This is where my mistake begins. I had been messaging Rachel earlier about how excited I was to see her, but at some point, I also had to reply to an old message from Emily. Emily had sent me a random text a few hours earlier, asking about a small thing she had left at my place when we broke up, something that seemed insignificant at the time, but now it felt like a weird reminder of the past. I told her I didn't mind meeting her to give it back if she needed it, but she said she'd come by tomorrow to pick it up. No big deal, right? So, after I finished texting Rachel, I opened my phone again and responded to Emily with a simple "all right, see you tomorrow." By this point, I had already slipped into a comfortable cooking rhythm. But then, while my hands were covered in flour and I was setting the table, I glanced down at my phone. In a half-distracted state, I typed, "I'm so excited to see you tonight. I've been thinking about you all day." Without even looking closely at the name on the message thread, I hit send. Immediately, I realized my mistake. My stomach dropped, and I froze. My brain tried to catch up with what just happened. I hadn't been thinking. The message was meant for Rachel, my new girlfriend, but I had accidentally sent it to Emily. Emily, the ex who I had not been romantically involved with in over 6 months. The Emily who would, no doubt, think this was some kind of cryptic emotional appeal or just a weird way of getting back in touch. The last thing I needed was for her to read that and think I was still harboring feelings. We were over. I had moved on. I was happy with Rachel. But that message, it was a disaster. For a split second, I considered just ignoring it, pretending I hadn't sent anything at all. But I knew that wasn't an option. It was too obvious, too risky. What if she responded with something even more awkward? Or worse, what if she showed up at my door to confront me about it? There was no escaping this. So I took a deep breath and, in my panic, decided the best course of action was to text Emily and apologize immediately. I quickly typed, "Oh my God, that was meant for someone else. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to send that to you." Before I could even hit send on the apology, my phone vibrated in my hand. Emily had responded. Okay, she texted. "Is everything all right?" I stared at the screen, reading her message over and over. Was she confused? Concerned? Was she playing it cool, acting like it wasn't a big deal even though it probably was? My heart was racing now, and the only thing I could think of was how to dig myself out of this hole. I decided to go for a more casual, somewhat embarrassing route to deflect the awkwardness. I sent another message, "Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I was just texting my girlfriend. I'm sure you understand, haha. I'm making dinner for her tonight." I hit send, and then immediately regretted everything. The last thing Emily needed to know was that I was in a new relationship. We had broken up for a reason, and me rubbing my relationship with Rachel in her face probably wasn't the best move, but it was too late now. I just had to wait for her response. Within seconds, Emily's reply came through. "Got it. Good luck with your dinner. Don't burn the place down." I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling utterly defeated. I had somehow turned a simple mistake into a full-blown awkward exchange with my ex. She clearly didn't want to dive deeper into the situation, which was a relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made everything 10 times more uncomfortable than it needed to be. The worst part? I hadn't even realized how I was feeling about it all until the texts were already sent. Now, all I could do was focus on making my dinner for Rachel. I didn't have the time to obsess over this anymore, and the last thing I wanted was for Rachel to think I was distracted or distant. I messaged her again to make sure she was on her way and to remind her how much I was looking forward to the evening. By the time Rachel arrived, the tension in my brain was starting to settle down. I tried to act as normal as possible, but the small voice in the back of my head kept saying, "You're an idiot, you're an idiot." Despite all my anxiety, Rachel and I had a great time, and the dinner, surprisingly, turned out pretty good. But even as we laughed and ate, I couldn't stop thinking about the message I sent to Emily. I had no idea how much it had affected her, if at all, and part of me hoped I'd never have to deal with that awkwardness again. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Rachel, "Thanks for dinner last night. It was perfect, and you're an amazing cook." But my phone also had a message from Emily. "I won't be picking up that thing today. Sorry to mess up your evening last night." I was grateful she had let it slide, but I couldn't help but feel like I was stuck in a weird limbo with my ex. I had messed up. Big time. And now, every time I looked at my phone, I feared I might accidentally send another wrong message. Lesson learned: never multitask while texting, especially when you're talking to your ex. End of story. TIFU by going on a blind date with my best friend's cousin and nearly ruining both of our lives. It all started a couple of months ago. My best friend, Dave, had been trying to set me up with his cousin, Sarah, for weeks. Dave had always talked about how great Sarah was, how we'd totally hit it off, and how we'd have so much fun together. Now, I'd never met Sarah in person, but Dave had shown me a few pictures, and she looked cute enough. I was intrigued but not exactly excited. The thing is, I'm not really the kind of guy who's into blind dates. They make me anxious, and I hate that forced, awkward small talk that comes with them. Still, Dave was insistent, and after a few weeks of pestering, I agreed to give it a shot. I told Dave I'd meet her at a local bar on Friday night, and he assured me it would be a casual hangout. No pressure. Just drinks, some laughs, and getting to know each other. Easy, right? Well, let's just say things didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. When I walked into the bar, I scanned the room and didn't see anyone who looked like the woman in the photos. I stood there awkwardly for a moment, checking my phone to see if I had the right time or location. That's when I got a text from Dave, * she's running a bit late, but she's on her way. Don't worry, bro, you'll have a blast. * okay, fair enough. I figured I'd wait it out, maybe have a beer while I killed some time. The bar was packed, but I eventually found a seat at the far end, near the pool table. I ordered a beer and sat back, trying to look relaxed, but inside I was dying. I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to talk about with someone I didn't know at all. Small talk? Passions? Hobbies? How do people have successful blind dates without awkward silences? About 15 minutes later, a woman walked in, and I swear, my heart skipped a beat. She was exactly what I had imagined Sarah to look like, tall, blonde, and with a great smile. I thought, this has to be her, so I stood up, waved in her direction, and she gave me a smile and started walking toward me. I introduced myself, trying to keep it cool, but on the inside, I was thinking, * this is going well so far. Smooth. Keep it together, * we sat down, and after the initial hellos and some casual conversation, things were going okay. Sarah was actually really easy to talk to, and we both had some common interests. It didn't feel like the dreadful blind date I'd envisioned. We talked about work, travel, movies, the usual stuff. I even started to relax a bit, and I could tell she was doing the same. But then things started to get a little weird. She kept making these odd comments that I didn't really know how to respond to. For example, she asked me, * so, have you ever done something that totally ruined your life? Like, just one huge mistake that you can't come back from? * I stared at her for a moment. Was she serious? This was a weird question to ask someone you just met. I laughed nervously and said, * I don't think so, at least, not yet. * She nodded thoughtfully, like she was really considering something deep. I didn't know if she was trying to be mysterious or just making an awkward attempt at being philosophical, but I figured it was no big deal. I decided to steer the conversation in a more normal direction. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, * do you have a family? Any siblings? * I replied, * yeah, I have an older sister, and my parents are both around. Nothing crazy. Sarah looked a little too intrigued by that answer. * do you ever wish you had a bigger family? You know, like, more siblings? I shrugged, I guess, but I've never really thought about it much. Why, are you the youngest of a big family? She paused, her face lighting up with an almost childlike excitement. Oh, no. I have a lot of siblings. I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and a bunch of half-siblings too. We're all very close. But you'll meet them soon enough, don't worry. They're awesome. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Meet them? I don't even know you yet. She grinned, completely unfazed. Oh, you'll meet them. Trust me. I wasn't sure what to make of that comment. It felt a little too forward, but I decided to roll with it. We kept talking for a while longer, and I was beginning to think that this might actually be going somewhere. That is, until the waitress came by to take our empty glasses and gave me the weirdest look. She then went back to the bar, only to come back moments later with another drink in hand. She slid the drink across the table and said, "This is from the guy over there." I glanced across the room, and sure enough, a guy sitting at the bar was smiling at me. He raised his glass in my direction. I turned to Sarah. What's that about? She didn't seem too fazed. Oh, don't mind him. He's just some guy I used to date. He still thinks he has a chance. I blinked. Wait, you're on a date with me, and your ex is over there? And you're just casually accepting drinks from him? She looked at me, completely deadpan, and said, Yeah, pretty much. He doesn't mind. He's just being friendly. We're still good, you know? I didn't know how to respond to that. I mean, I'm not the jealous type, but this was starting to feel like a scene from a bad rom-com, where everyone is awkwardly entwined in each other's lives in the most uncomfortable way possible. But the night didn't stop there. We kept talking, and I thought I had started to understand Sarah a little better. Then she suddenly mentioned that her cousins, including Dave, my best friend would be coming by in about 30 minutes. I raised an eyebrow. Wait, you're telling me that your whole family is just going to show up here? She nodded, smiling as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Yeah, they're cool with it. It's what we do. It'll be fun. By now, I was starting to question my life choices. A blind date is one thing, but meeting an entire extended family without even getting a chance to know the person you're supposed to be on a date with? That was something else. But I had already committed, so I stayed. And sure enough, 30 minutes later, the door swung open, and in came a group of people. And guess who was leading the pack? None other than my best friend, Dave. He looked around, saw me, and waved. Hey, man. Glad you came. I knew you two would hit it off. I couldn't even believe it. Sarah's casual hangout had turned into a full-blown family reunion. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and honestly, kind of a disaster. I spent the next 2 hours sitting with Sarah's cousins, trying to act normal while my best friend made awkward jokes and everyone tried to get me to dance. Needless to say, the night didn't go as I planned. Sarah was nice, but her family was overwhelming. And I spent the rest of the night wondering if I had just signed up for a series of forced gatherings and awkward family dinners. Long story short, that blind date never went anywhere. I'm still friends with Dave, but I've decided to avoid any more blind dates for the foreseeable future. As for Sarah? I think we'll both agree to just leave that chapter of our lives behind. I'll just stick to meeting people the old-fashioned way, without the entire family showing up. TIFU by accidentally sending a text message to my mom that was meant for my girlfriend. So, here's the thing, I'm a guy who's pretty much addicted to texting. I'm constantly on my phone, which, as you can imagine, has caused some pretty awkward moments in the past. But this one takes the cake. I really never thought something like this could happen to me. Let me explain. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I had an argument. Nothing major, just the usual miscommunications and frustration that comes with being in a relationship. She was upset because I'd forgotten an important date, our anniversary. In my defense, it wasn't intentional. I've been swamped with work, and my calendar app just isn't as reliable as I thought. Anyway, I spent the entire evening texting her, apologizing profusely, promising her that I'd make it up to her with a romantic date night, and trying to make things right. Eventually, after a lot of back and forth, we'd made up. She even sent me a sweet message saying, "I forgive you," but you owe me big time, winky face. That was the last text she sent me that night. The next morning, I woke up groggily, already late for work. I grabbed my phone and started going through the usual routine, checking texts, emails, and scrolling through social media. I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to text my girlfriend something I had been planning for later that evening. We had been discussing plans for a special surprise, and I wanted to make sure everything was ready for her. I had been planning to text her a little something flirty and romantic, like a preview of what was to come. Something along the lines of, "I've got a special night planned for us tonight. You won't believe what I've got in store for you, winky face." Nothing too crazy, but definitely something that would make her smile and remind her of the fun we had together. What I didn't realize, in my half-awake state, was that my mom had texted me earlier that morning, just a simple good morning. "Hope you have a great day, smiley face." I had seen her message, but in the rush to get out of bed, I didn't bother to reply right away. So when I picked up my phone and saw a message from my mom at the top of my inbox, I made the fatal mistake of assuming it was from my girlfriend. You know, the usual way you scroll through your texts and don't really pay attention to who's sending what? That was my first mistake. I didn't even bother to check the name at the top of the text thread. I just saw the last text I remembered from my girlfriend and began typing. "Here's the message I meant to send to her. Tonight is gonna be amazing. I can't wait to see your reaction when I pull this off. I've been planning this all week, just wait and see what's coming, winky face." Now, here's where I really messed up. I accidentally hit send without double checking, and within a few seconds, I realized that the message had gone to the wrong person. A cold, uncomfortable realization washed over me like a wave, and my stomach dropped into my feet. The person who had just received that message was not my girlfriend. It was my mom. My mom. I stared at the screen in horror, my mind racing. I immediately opened the chat with my mom, hoping beyond hope that the message hadn't sent. But nope, there it was, bold as day. "Tonight is gonna be amazing. I can't wait to see your reaction when I pull this off. I've been planning this all week, just wait and see what's coming, winky face." I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I frantically typed a response, trying to salvage the situation, but I couldn't figure out how to explain this without it sounding like I was an absolute lunatic. Wait, Moem. That was meant for someone else. I'm so sorry. That was for my girlfriend. My heart was pounding in my chest. What was my mom going to say? How could I fix this? Seconds felt like hours as I waited for her response. And then, like a death sentence, the 3 dots appeared. She was typing. "Son, I don't know what you're planning, but I'm concerned. Please talk to me." Oh. My God. Now, not only had I accidentally sent an incredibly inappropriate text to my mom, but she also thought I was planning something amazing with her. I had absolutely no idea how to recover from this. The only thing I could think of was to pretend the entire message was some kind of joke. So, I typed furiously, haha, no. It's not like that. I was just talking about a surprise date with my girlfriend. I swear. I wasn't planning anything weird. At this point, my mom hadn't responded yet, and I was seriously considering throwing my phone in a river and moving to a remote island somewhere. I mean, how could I explain this? My mind was running through every possible worst-case scenario. What if she thought I was talking about something else? What if she thought I was just messing around in a way that made her uncomfortable? What if she called me out for being weird or inappropriate? I was going to need to get a new identity and start over. Finally, my mom replied, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know you were so into surprise dates now, but I hope you both enjoy. Don't forget to send me pictures of your dinner or whatever." I froze. I literally didn't know what to say. Did she just acknowledge my message? Was she trying to act like it was all normal? The tension in the air was thick, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no way to fully undo the awkwardness. The best I could do was pretend I hadn't sent anything weird. After a few more texts back and forth, she finally ended the conversation with, "Good luck with your plans tonight. I'm sure she'll love it." I spent the next couple of hours trying to compose myself, and finally, I texted my girlfriend to explain what had happened. She thought it was hilarious, of course, and even joked that maybe she needed to start texting me like my mom to get those amazing plans too. To make matters worse, my mom did end up asking me for pictures of my dinner later that evening, and I'm pretty sure I'll never be able to look her in the eye again without cringing. Now, every time my phone buzzes, I double-check who I'm texting before I send anything. Moral of the story: double-check who you're texting. It doesn't matter if you've been with someone for a long time, or if you're in a rush, accidentally sending the wrong message can make you wish you'd never been born. Or at least make you want to take a vow of silence forever. Please, learn from my mistakes. Otherwise, you might end up with a very confused and concerned mom who now thinks her son has been planning some mysterious amazing surprise she definitely wasn't prepared for. So, this happened yesterday, and I'm still in disbelief that it went down the way it did. The whole thing started when I decided to try something a little different. I've always been that person who sticks to the same routine: wake up, work, go to the gym, eat, sleep. It's a pretty boring life, but I've never minded it. However, lately I've been feeling like I need a change. Nothing too drastic, just something to spice things up a little. On Monday, I was talking to my friend Jason, who's one of those people that constantly seeks out new adventures. He had recently been talking about these alternative health treatments he's been doing, things like ear candling, float tanks, and even something called cupping. Now, I'm not one for these sorts of things, but hearing him talk about it with such passion made me curious. Maybe I'd try something too. He kept going on about this place in town that offered a very unusual service, a salt therapy room. Jason explained that it was supposed to be really good for stress relief and respiratory health. He swore it worked wonders. I was dubious, but honestly, after hearing him go on and on about how much it helped him with his anxiety and general well-being, I thought, why not? I'll give it a shot. I was just looking for something to break up my boring routine. So, after some quick Googling, I booked an appointment for the next day. The day of my appointment, I was already regretting it. It was 3 p.m., and I'd had a long morning of work. I wasn't really in the mood to try something weird and out of my comfort zone. But I didn't want to back out, so I went anyway. I arrived at the spa around 4 p.m. The place was tucked away in a small, unassuming strip mall. It looked almost too serene for my taste: soft lighting, the smell of lavender wafting through the air, and the sound of gentle ambient music. Immediately, I felt out of place. But I reminded myself that I'd come this far, and I wasn't going to back out now. The receptionist greeted me and asked me to fill out a brief questionnaire. Stuff like, do you have any respiratory issues? Are you allergic to salt? And do you have a history of claustrophobia? I answered no to all the questions and handed it back. After a few minutes, she led me to a small room where a thin door separated what I assumed was the salt therapy room from the rest of the building. It looked like a standard treatment room: bare walls, a single comfy lounge chair, and a cozy blanket on the floor. Then she said the words that would forever change the course of the day: you'll need to take off your shoes and socks, and you can choose whether you want to wear the robe or keep your regular clothes on. But I recommend the robe for maximum comfort. I nodded awkwardly, unsure whether I wanted to strip down to a robe in a place I'd never been before. I opted to just keep my clothes on, thinking it would be weird if I changed. She handed me a pair of slippers and told me I could sit in the room for about 45 minutes while the salt therapy worked its magic. I entered the therapy room and immediately noticed the most bizarre thing. The entire room was filled with what appeared to be a thick layer of salt. The floor was covered in it, and even the walls had what looked like chunks of Himalayan pink salt embedded in them. The air was thick with the smell of salt. It was almost like being inside a giant salt shaker. I hesitated for a moment, trying to understand what the heck I was supposed to do. It didn't help that I could barely see anyone else in the room. There was just one other person lounging in a chair across the room, clearly deep into their own salt-induced serenity. I didn't know if I should sit, lie down, or just breathe in the salty air. I opted for the chair. As soon as I sat down, the room filled with a low hum. Apparently, the spa used some sort of salt aerosol system to disperse tiny salt particles into the air. The receptionist had explained it earlier, but honestly, I didn't fully understand it at the time. The idea was that the fine salt particles would enter my respiratory system and clear out all the gunk, leaving me feeling relaxed and breathing easier. In theory, it sounded great. In practice, it was odd. At first, everything was fine. I was just sitting there, trying to relax, but the salt particles started making my throat itch. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. I took shallow breaths, trying not to cough. I didn't want to look like a total idiot, especially with the other person in the room looking so blissed out. I swallowed, hoping it would ease the irritation, but it didn't work. The itch was becoming unbearable. And then, I did the one thing I knew I shouldn't do in a room full of salt. I started coughing. It wasn't just a small cough either. It was a full-on, deep, racking cough that I couldn't control. The more I tried to suppress it, the more intense it became. My throat felt like it was on fire, and I felt like I was suffocating on salt particles. I was sure I was about to choke. But it didn't stop there. As I coughed uncontrollably, I accidentally knocked over the small table next to me, spilling a glass of water all over the salt-covered floor. The water didn't mix well with the salt and created a sort of mini lake right in front of my chair. I quickly grabbed a towel, trying to clean it up as best as I could, but now I was making a mess on top of everything else. It felt like I was in some surreal nightmare. The other person in the room shot me a weird look, probably wondering what the hell was going on. I could feel their judgment piercing through the thick salt-scented air. I was sweating, my face red from coughing, my eyes watering, everything was just wrong. At this point, I was seriously regretting the decision to try this relaxing therapy. Finally, the session ended. The receptionist came back in and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine, not wanting to embarrass myself further. But I could tell by the look on her face that she knew I wasn't doing well. She escorted me back to the front, where I quickly threw on my shoes and paid for the session, trying not to look like I'd just survived a salt-induced disaster. As I left the spa, I couldn't stop coughing. It took a good 10 minutes for my throat to calm down, and even now, I still feel a little scratchy. I don't think I'll be going back for another session anytime soon. The whole thing was a disaster. Not only did I end up feeling like I was drowning in salt, but I also managed to embarrass myself in front of a complete stranger. Moral of the story: stick to the gym, folks. Some routines are better left undisturbed. So, let me start by saying that I've had a pretty smooth ride in my job. I work as a project manager for a fairly large company, and while it's a demanding position, I've always been able to keep my head above water. That is, until last week, when I made the most horrifying mistake of my career. It all began with a new project. We were working on a new product line, something big that would make a significant impact on the company's future. The project was top secret, and we were under strict orders not to let anyone outside the team in on the details, especially not the higher-ups, at least not yet. It was still in the planning and testing stages, and the higher-ups had no idea we were even working on it. I was responsible for keeping track of the project's progress, making sure everything was moving smoothly, and reporting updates to my direct boss, who was somewhat hands-off but still wanted regular updates. She wasn't really a micromanager, so I appreciated that, but it also meant I had a little bit more freedom to take things into my own hands. I had a good relationship with her, nothing too close, but enough that I felt comfortable talking to her when necessary. One Friday afternoon, I had just wrapped up a meeting with the project team to review the latest development of the new product. We were making great progress, and I felt confident that the project was moving in the right direction. However, there was still a lot of work to do, and I needed to prepare a detailed report for the boss. This report was crucial because we were about to hit a major milestone, and my boss would need to be briefed on how we were doing. So, I opened up my work laptop, pulled up the project files, and began drafting the report. I was feeling pretty good about it, typing away and referencing the data as I went along. Everything seemed fine until I accidentally clicked on the wrong tab in my browser. Instead of pulling up a document related to the report I was working on, I opened a completely different one. Now, I don't know how it happened, but what I opened was an early prototype of a completely different project we had been working on in secret. This wasn't just a small error, it was a full-blown, detailed design document that revealed some of the most confidential information the company had been developing. It was a product that was still in its infancy, and nobody outside our team was supposed to know about it. I'm talking full schematics, branding concepts, and even a rough launch timeline. I panicked. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze for a moment, not sure what to do. I tried to close the tab as quickly as I could, but in my haste, I clicked the wrong button. And what do you think happened? The document got saved to the cloud. Not only had I accidentally opened it, but now it was saved on my work account, synced across all devices. And then, to make things worse, my boss sent me a Slack message asking for an update. Can you send me a quick report on how things are going with the project? Need it for the meeting Monday, she said. I immediately realized that the last thing I needed was to have this file on my screen when I sent her a report. I was staring at the project details that I wasn't supposed to be showing anyone, and my heart was racing. I tried to act quickly and salvage the situation, but I made another mistake. In my frantic attempt to close the document and save the correct file, I accidentally clicked send on the Slack message instead of save draft on the report I had been working on. My report, which was supposed to be a detailed summary of the progress we were making on the current project, now had that secret prototype document attached to it. I sat there in complete horror, staring at the screen as it loaded the message, praying that I could undo it somehow. But there was no undo button in this scenario. I watched as my boss read the message. There was no response, not immediately at least. I tried to calm myself, thinking maybe she hadn't noticed. Maybe she'd be so busy that she wouldn't have time to look at the attachment. But then came the dreaded reply. Is this part of the new product you're working on? I didn't think we were revealing this to anyone yet, she said. I sat there, utterly dumbfounded, wondering how I could possibly fix this. How could I explain that I'd just exposed our entire secret project by accident? I couldn't exactly lie. She would know. And worse, the project was still months away from being ready for public eyes. If it got out too soon, it could ruin everything. If anyone else at the company saw it, we'd have leaks everywhere. I tried to recover, but it only got worse from there. In a complete panic, I sent her a follow-up message explaining that it was an accidental upload and that I hadn't meant to attach that document. I begged her not to tell anyone and assured her that it was still in its early stages. I promised her I'd make sure nothing like that would happen again. But at that point, it was too late. She asked me to come to her office right away. I walked into her office, already feeling like I was about to lose my job. She sat me down and stared at me for a moment before asking, "How did this happen?" I tried to explain myself, stammering my way through the story of how I had opened the wrong document, closed it too quickly, and accidentally sent it in the report. It was humiliating. She didn't seem angry, but I could tell she was disappointed, which felt worse. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I'm going to have to report this," she said. "This is a serious breach of confidentiality." I nodded, completely understanding. My mind was spinning as I realized what had just happened. This could be the end of my career at the company. I'd messed up in a way I couldn't take back. In the end, my boss took the situation up the chain of command. Luckily, the higher-ups didn't seem to hold it against me as much as I feared, but the damage was done. They gave me a warning and put me on a probationary period. I still have my job, but the trust one had with my team and the higher-ups was shaken, and it's going to take a lot of work to rebuild it. So, yeah. That's how I accidentally exposed a secret project and nearly lost my job. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to always double-check what I'm sending and make sure I'm not about to expose something that's not ready for the world. You never know when a mistake will follow you around like a bad reputation. TLDR, accidentally attached a secret product prototype to a report for my boss and sent it. My boss saw it and asked me to explain. Now I'm on probation and trying to repair the damage to my career. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.